you guys? The Curious Owl here, and today I have my January 2024 wrap-up. I really started out the gate strong when it came to reading in January. I read, I think, the most I have ever read in 1 month in terms of the amount of books that I had read. It was absolutely insane. And I do have to thank the Battle of the Bookish for really kicking it into gear for me this year so far, starting out the year strong with a lot of books. So we're not gonna get too crazy with it. I have a lot of things that are basically parts of series that I'm going to really work on in terms of talking about them all together. Let's go ahead and get into the stats of the month. In the month of January, I read 29 books. 29 books, holy shit. I have never read that many books. Now, granted, a lot of them were graphic novels, and I will explain that here as I go through the month, but regardless of the fact that the majority of them had been graphic novels, that is the most amount of physical books I have read in an entire month, or at least the most amount of whatever, physical, ebook, audiobook, doesn't matter. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot of books in 1 month, and I'm so proud of myself. Whether or not I'm going to be able to beat that any given month, I guess we'll have to wait until June to see in the next round of Battle of the Bookish if I end up beating that. But I really don't think I'm gonna top that. I think I've capped my amount of books total in the month this past month. It was bananas, truthfully. So I, though, had a total of 6,188 pages read over the course of the month and 0 minutes worth of audiobooks. I did not listen to an audiobook in terms of it by itself. I did listen to audiobooks along with physical books, but those only get counted for whatever they are, whether it's a physical book or an ebook by itself, because I basically keep track in those, and I have them for whatever reason, so I track that more so as opposed to the audiobook itself. So with that, though, 28 of the books I ended up reading this month were physical and 1 was an ebook, and 24 of the books I read were from my personal library, and 4 of the books I read this month were borrowed. This month I had 14 5-star reads, which is absolutely amazing. I'm so glad I have that. And then I had 13 that were 4-star reads. I had 2 3-star reads, 1 2-star read, and I did have a DNF, and I will be unhauling a book in the course of this month, which is not necessarily the best of things, but I'm happy to have at least reached a point where I am able to unhaul something because I am not enjoying it. I am not, interested in it, and I'm just glad that I'm actually getting to a point where I'm saying no to certain things, and I think that's a huge thing for me. So I'm going to keep all my series together that I read essentially together, even if I spread it out a little bit more over the course of the month. But the first book that basically by itself I read was My Dear Henry by Kalynn Bayron. This is a retelling and remix of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story by Robert Louis Stevenson. This was one of my first 5-star reads of the month. I fell in love with this story. It is also a male-male romance story, and it follows this character named Gabriel who gets involved with a young man that basically is our Hyde and our Mr. Jekyll. He becomes at first incredibly fast friends with him, but then they fall in love, and over time you start to realize that their relationship becomes very tense because Jekyll starts to kind of walk away from him. This is also placed in a time where obviously being gay was not really well looked upon in English society, and on top of that, Gabriel is a black man, so there are some additional problems within that, and there's a lot of societal things that play into the story. I think personally that Kalynn really hit this on the head in terms of what I was expecting going into this kind of a story. Not only were the nuances of being a black person looked at in terms of how he was viewed in his line of work and by other people, but also then adding in the layer of being gay was another really big thing that I think didn't necessarily take away from anything of the original story. I think if anything, it enhanced it, and it really, by what it's actually essentially doing, remixed the story. Okay, so next I'm gonna go talk about two series that are basically by the same author. They are all part of the same world, and that is the Descender and Ascender graphic novels. I have finally completed both Descender and Ascender, which Ascender takes place 10 years after the events of Descender, and we're gonna talk about the individual ratings, but overall what I thought of the story. Descender Volume 1 ended up getting a 5 out of 5 stars for me. Volume 2 ended up getting 4 stars. Volume 3 was a 5 star. Volume 4 was a 4 star, and Volume 5 was a 5 star, and then Volume 6 was also a 5 star. When it comes to the Ascender series, Volume 1 got a 5 star, as well as Volume 2 and Volume 3, and then Volume 4 ended up getting a 4 star. Overall, this series is a wonderful science fiction series. It all follows essentially from Descender, this android who had been asleep for 10 years when this entire AI android rebellion had essentially hit, and many people died because of it. Tim, 21 though, one of the androids that was in this world at the time, he was placed to sleep for 10 years, and when he wakes up, his entire planet that he knew is gone. His mother and his brother that he had are missing. He doesn't know where they are, and then you find out that because he has awakened, now several types of people are coming to get him for whatever reason, for good and for bad. And it's literally a story of following the kind of look at what this world is like now after this AI rebellion. And Ascender is, like I said, 10 years later, where it follows the child of a couple that is in the story of Descender, and essentially looking at the world now, when there's a lot of things that change. There's a lot of more magic that's involved in Ascender. There is a little bit more of this look at, you know, what really is more important or more valid in this world. Is magic more valid, or is more technology and science more valid? And really looking at the world that is split in this way, and how the ramifications of Descender play into the world 10 years later. And it is absolutely wonderful. This series is probably one of my favorite graphic novel series I've ever read. Highly recommend it if you are a science fiction fan, and especially if you're looking to get into science fiction but don't know where to start, especially if you're looking for types of work that is easy to get into, very easy to kind of wrap your head around. This is definitely a series I would recommend, and especially for those that are kind of new to the science fiction genre. The next series I'm going to talk about is a series I buddy read with both my mother and my sister, and that is Fourth Wing and Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. We read this all together over the course of January, and I am shocked with how much I fell in love with this series. I quite honestly thought that I was going to go into this series and feel very kind of like okay about it, like I was going to probably enjoy it, but I wasn't going to like completely fall in love with it like I did. And all I'm going to say is that 5 stars, both of these, but after book 2, I need book 3 like right now. I need it right now. I need to know what is going to happen. I need Rebecca Yarros to get this book out now, or at the very least make sure that it does come out in December 2024 like it is listed, because good freaking God, I am so attached to these characters. I'm so attached to this world. I am probably going to reread both of these before book 3 releases on my own, and you better fucking believe I'm gonna annotate them that time, because I have so many thoughts, I have so many things, I have so many theories of what to expect with book 3, especially with some of the very limited knowledge that I know about with this series. I need it now. I need it right now. Give me book 3, and then give me book 4, and then give me book 5, and then let me sit and cry my eyes out. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the book in turn that I read, but I'm going to show a book that's more in like the series because I don't have the book physically with me. But anyway, I read a Nora Roberts book called Taming Natasha, which is the first book in this series, which is the Stanislavski series. It is following several siblings in this family that have their own romantic aspects. Like it's a romance series. I really disliked it. This was actually my 2-star read, and I tried to read the next book, which I ended up DNFing. I don't even remember what the second book was called, but I ended up DNFing it. And I've decided that I'm going to unhaul this series. This book in particular, Chasing Destiny, is books 5 and 6, I believe, in the series. But I had the first 4 borrowed from my library, and after I got to book 2, I was just like not really interested. The first book was really just annoying. It was just not as good as I had wanted it to be. Like, I have a feeling that I am going to probably be unhauling a lot of Nora Roberts books, because I have decided that I'm going to try to put Nora Roberts on like my self-destruct TBR in general as an author for the year 2024, because I have so many of her books, and I got them because I read a couple books of hers previously that I had kind of liked, but now thinking on them, I don't like them as much, and they're not as really memorable as other books. And so I'm testing myself to see if this year I don't read very many of her books, that I'm going to end up basically either unhauling them, giving them away, something like that. Or if I just, you know, find that I don't like some of her books, I'm going to unhaul the ones I don't like, you know, something to that effect. So we're kind of in that first like kind of phase of that, with this in particular being the book I'm going to be unhauling, because I don't care for this series. I don't care for the way that she wrote these characters. I'm not interested in the other siblings of the Stanislavski family because of how poorly I thought of Natasha, and how I DNF'd the next book, which followed her brother Mikhail, I think was his name. I think that was his name. They're Ukrainian, essentially. They're Ukrainian American. Very, very flat characters. Like, seriously, the worst kind of romance I have read so far. And that's saying a lot, because there's some pretty bad romances out there. Okay, next I'm going to talk about The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the first book in the Witcher read-along series that I am doing over the course of 2024. This is a reread for me. I did read this originally a couple years ago and really liked it. I did rate it this time a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that this time around, I just found that the stories were more disjointed than I had originally thought, because when I first read this, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars and really liked it. But I found that this time when reading it, the stories were a little bit more disjointed, were not nearly as cohesive as I had thought they were, and some of the stories were a little bit too long-winded for me. I felt like that they could have really been cut down in a lot of ways because they were just extensive. But there is a live show going on for this. By the time this video goes out, the live show will have already happened, so you can go check out the replay of that. But we are going to be reading this series over the course of 2024. The majority of it, at least, because there's only so many books in the series, and I think we're going up until August of this year. But the second book that we are reading is Sword of Destiny, which you can go check out my TBR for February about, because I talk a little bit more about the live show for that coming up and stuff like that. But definitely check out the replay for this if you haven't already, and let me know your thoughts on it if you did read The Last Wish and enjoyed it, didn't enjoy it, anything like that. And next we've got another graphic novel series that I'm going to talk about, which is Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I did read 11 of the volumes in this. I borrowed books 10 and 11 from my library, and I believe that we are almost completely caught up. I think there's one more volume that I still need to read that came out in November, but my library did not have it yet because it's such a new release. But let's go over the rating I had for each of the volumes. So volume 1, I rated a 4 out of 5 stars, as well as volume 2. Volume 3 was a 3-star. Volume 4 was a 4-star. 5 was a 3-star. 6 and 7 were 4 stars. 8 was a 4-star as well, and then volume 9 was a 5-star, and volume 10 was a 4-star, and then finally volume 11 was also a 4-star. So overall, I think I really like this series. I really feel like this is, again, another science fiction series that is really good for those that want to get into a world and understand science fiction a little bit better. This is very much a Romeo and Juliet in space kind of idea, and a baby is involved because the story is told from the perspective of their child years after everything happens, where essentially her parents are from 2 different sides of a war that is going on, and they are not supposed to be together, obviously, and having a baby is like the worst thing that could happen. And so there's tons of people from either side coming to find them. It's a story that is actually, in a lot of ways, heartbreaking, especially when you get attached to certain characters. And the more characters that we kind of find over the course of this series, you know, you start to fall in love with or kind of at least like. And it's just kind of one of those stories though too where a lot of the choices that are made I disagree with, and I think is why I had such lower ratings for some of these. I feel like that some of the choices that were made overall on the characters' part were not necessary or were in the worst possible interest of the child specifically that's involved in this. And I just find that a little bit irritating and a little bit aggravating at times, but I do think that this is a very solid science fiction series. I do love it in a lot of ways and definitely recommend it. It is very adult content though. This is more adult content than the Descender and Ascender series. This has a very graphic like sexual activity involved in it. There's a lot of blood and gore, but like when I say sexual activity, like you are seeing penises and vaginas and all that stuff. So it is definitely not something that you should be reading if you are not an adult age. If you're like kind of in that, you know, adult range, definitely check it out, but don't let your kids read this. This is not a kids series. Descender and Ascender is more kid friendly. This is not. Move on from this if you are a parent looking for a science fiction graphic novel series. This is not something that your kids should be reading. Next, I have City of Glass by Cassandra Clare. This is book 3 in the Mortal Instruments series. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was, and I'm finding that when reading the Mortal Instruments, I'm enjoying it more than I think I'm going to. I feel like that there are a lot of things within this one in particular that I still feel kind of icky about, particularly the main romance that there is in the series that everybody knows about. I still feel kind of icky about some things, but I'm happy to see that, you know, there is some resolution with a lot of that. I do see where a lot of people say that this, though, could have been just the ultimate end of the Mortal Instruments, and it could have, like, you know, stopped here and we see nothing else of these characters and everything moves on. However, because I still have to read the second half of this series, books 4, 5, and 6, I can't really say whether or not I, you know, think that it should have stopped here. I do see, though, based on the way that this ends, that for a lot of people felt like closure, and it felt like that the series could have stopped there. But we'll see with how books 4, 5, and 6 are for me personally, whether I think that that's the case. But I have enjoyed the series quite a bit so far. Then the next book I ended up reading was Haikyuu Volume 5. This was a book I borrowed from the library. Again, the 5th volume in the Haikyuu series by Haruchi Furudate. This is a manga series about a set of boys in high school that play volleyball. And overall, I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I feel like that this one was just kind of like, like it wasn't really anything spectacular, but I will say that by the end of this one in particular, this is where the boys end up actually going to like one of their first huge tournaments in their history, especially after having been, you know, so badly beaten by so many different teams for the last couple of years when they were this really big team, and like really popular, really strong. And to see how things are going in this tournament is amazing, and I was definitely like kind of bouncing in my seat, like super excited to see the boys get really, really pumped up and happy. And it reminded me a lot of when I was in tournaments with my team, how that kind of feeling was. And so it brought back some fairly decent memories. But again, this was in a time of my life where I had a lot of things going on that were really not good. So it was kind of like a conflicting kind of setup. But overall, really liked it. Just not as much as how I felt about the other volumes in this series. And finally, before my camera dies, I did end up reading Will by Will Smith. This is his memoir, and I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I feel like that there was a lot of things that could have been condensed in this. I feel like that the waxing poetic of a lot of things in this novel were kind of just filler. It didn't feel like that some things had a lot of substance to them. But I understand that there's a lot of things that Will has in terms of like thoughts, feelings, things about like certain events that happened in his life. I'm not discounting anything that he wrote, especially about some of the abuse that he dealt with as a child, some of the things that he, you know, experienced growing up and as he was becoming a superstar. I do disagree with a lot of choices that he made personally, but you know, they're not my choices to have made. They are choices that a man that is my parents' age had made, and I can't judge him for those choices because they're not the choices I had made. But I disagree disagree with them in some capacity. I just think that overall the story, like the way that he had told his story could have been condensed a little bit. I feel like there was a lot of filler that I didn't necessarily need to know nor was interested in. But I think for a memoir, this was really solid and definitely puts a lot of perspective in terms of understanding him as a person and a lot of the things that he dealt with and how he viewed things as he was becoming a star, and understanding his psyche and understanding a lot of things that I don't think people recognize when it comes to celebrities and how they are put on a pedestal in a lot of ways and the pressure that that puts on them. And I think that this is just a really good understanding of Will himself, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm excited to read Worthy by Jada Pinkett Smith. I'm currently starting that, and I'm interested to see how her view of things was in their relationship, because this was something I had asked my friends about, where they had asked me to read Will and Worthy together and kind of like come to my own conclusion about their relationship, since things like the slap happened and it turned out that Jada had been in an extramarital affair with somebody else while still married to Will, and some of the things that have happened, you know, in the course of that. Battery died there, but basically what I was trying to wrap up and say is that I am not sure how I'm going to necessarily be able to talk about it, but there will be a video that does discuss, you know, both books a little bit and kind of some of the thoughts that I have about, you know, the way in which they're written. Not so much about their relationship, because of the fact that like I can't speak on their relationship. I am an outsider, you know, viewing things from, you know, my perspective, but, you know, talking a little bit about some of the things in terms of like the choices that they made, whether or not I agree with them, but ultimately more so about the memoirs themselves and whether I feel like they cohesively as a unit really, you know, work well together, and what things I find between the two of them that either are different or the same or anything like that. So kind of just like, I think seeing like his side, her side, what seems to be a disconnect, what seems to be said on one end but is viewed a different way from Jada's perspective, stuff like that. So that's kind of like what I'm thinking of. But with that, that is actually going to be the end of my wrap up. Very proud of what I've been able to do in the month of January. I am certain I'm not gonna hit that goal any month other than maybe June, if June ends up being just as good for Battle of the Bookish. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be, I would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an Owlette in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys.